The Portland Trailblazers are better than you think. This team is one of the most underrated teams in the NBA right now, and they're not getting enough credit. There's so many different storylines we're going to talk about today, whether it's Deni Avdija becoming a superstar, the super underrated Shaedon Sharpe leap that he's having, all the injuries that are affecting this Blazers team, young Hansen being a bit of a disappointment to start off his NBA career, and more. Stick to the end of the video, and I hope you guys enjoy it. First things first, I know it's been a while since I've recorded a video. I don't have any excuses, just haven't been super motivated to make videos lately and have been watching a lot of the Blazer games still, of course. Like many of you, it was a busy season with the holidays, but in this new year, I'm hoping to make more videos than I did last year, and so if you're new, please make sure to hit that subscribe button for weekly videos, and if you've been around for a while, I appreciate you still being here. But with that out of the way, let's get into the video. So, of course, the biggest story for the Portland Trailblazers this season has been Deni Avdija. Deni Avdija, we knew was a good player. When he got traded from the Washington Wizards, it was no shock that Deni was a pretty good player. He wasn't utilized to the best of his ability while he was in Washington, and he seemed like a really good, low risk, high reward kind of trade that the Portland Trailblazers were making. And sure enough, he started off his first season with the Blazers a little bit slow. You could definitely see that it took him a little while to get his feet under him, but by the end of last season, you could tell that Deni Avdija was truly making the turn to becoming a true NBA star. And so the big question going into this season was, is that still going to be the case, right? Is he still going to be a 20 plus points per game player, or is he going to regress back down to where he was to start last season? Because you see that often where players end the season playing well, but you know, there's always that caveat where other teams might be tanking and not really trying as hard as they would if it was the start of the season, and so it's easier for players like Deni Avdija to have better games. But sure enough, the start of the season looked great for Deni Avdija, and it looked like he picked up right where he left off at the end of last year, and he's been playing like a superstar on a nightly basis. On the season, Deni Avdija is averaging 26.1 points, 7.1 rebounds, and 6.9 assists. Deni has looked like an absolute monster out there on the court, and is really the whole reason why the Blazers are even playing decent at all right now. Of course, there's other factors that we'll talk about in this video, but Deni Avdija playing like one of the top 10 best players in the NBA was something that I think even his biggest fans weren't expecting this year. At the start of the season, it really seemed like, yeah, maybe Deni could be the most improved player. He's playing pretty well. And then it slowly turned into, well, maybe he could make the All-Star team. You never know if he keeps it up. And then it quickly changed to, okay, he's an All-Star for sure. And if he doesn't make an All-Star team, then that's just an insane snub. And at this point, I think the conversation should shift a bit to, can he make an All-NBA team, and which All-NBA team? Could he make All-Second NBA team? Every single part of Deni Avdija's game has just looked so much better this season. His scoring, his ability to get downhill and draw fouls, his passing ability is something that I think is super underrated, especially with the Blazers just being without really any point guards for the majority of the season. We knew that Scoot Henderson was hurt and we weren't going to see him for at least a few months. And, you know, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more in the video. But the fact that Scoot's still hurt and we may not see him until March, if at all, this whole season is just insane and shows a lack of communication from the Blazers medical staff. But then we had Jrue Holiday for a few games, but sure enough, less than 10 games into the season, Jrue Holiday goes out, and as of the time of this recording, he just came back in yesterday's game. And so Jrue Holiday being out most of the year, Scoot Henderson not playing a single game so far this year, and then Blake Wesley, kind of your immediate third string point guard, goes down early in the season. And so the Blazers have really been without a true facilitator, and with all that, that has forced Deni Avdija to step up in that role, and Point Deni has been phenomenal this year, averaging nearly 7 assists per game. For a guy like him, who normally shouldn't be asked to pass that much, is just insane. And the fact that he's averaging nearly 36 minutes per game and he's played pretty much every game this season and is averaging that many assists is just insane. He has a 1.8 assist to turnover ratio, which is great. And so you've kind of seen the team have to lean on Deni, and for a lot of players, they might get this kind of pressure put on them and they just crumble. They can't meet the standard that is being asked of them. But Deni has completely stepped up to the task and is really filling in all the gaps that this team needs and is doing everything that the team is asking of him and plus some. And so it's really cool to see Deni Avdija's all-star leap and I'm excited to see how the rest of the season goes for him, and hopefully this back injury is no big deal for him. Something else though that people haven't been talking about enough, I think, is the Shaedon Sharpe leap and how much better he's looked this year. On the season, Shaedon Sharpe is averaging 21.5 points, which is the highest points per game of any player from his class, and that's with 4.4 rebounds and 2.6 assists. Now 2.6 assists is nothing crazy. He has a 0.9 assist to turnover ratio, so just about 1 assist per turnover, which isn't exactly great. However, compared to past seasons, it does feel like at least Shaedon Sharpe is making the right passes and is focusing a little bit more on playmaking. Now, the problem with the NBA is you only get an assist when the person you pass to actually makes the shot. And so there's a handful of assists, quote unquote, throughout the game where Shane makes the right play, and then sure enough, the person he passes to misses the shot. He doesn't get the assist, but you can just see in the flow of the game, he is thinking a lot more about the team, whereas in past seasons, it definitely just felt like he was trying to get his own shot. And so seeing him step up in a big way for this team has been great. And, you know, if it wasn't for Deni Avdija, I think Shaedon Sharpe would be the talk of the Blazers fandom. And just how much he's been stepping up has been really, really cool to see. And he's been great this year. He is arguably playing like an all-star as well. I don't think he'll be even close to considered an all-star just because of how many great players are in the NBA right now. But if you want to argue he's playing at an all-star level, then I think that's completely fair. He's averaging nearly 30 minutes per game. And so on top of playing a lot and having a really high usage rate, all of his stats look a lot better, including his steals. He's averaging the most steals of any Blazer player right now with 1.5 steals per game. And so seeing Shane step up a little bit more on defense is also cool to see. And I think Shaedon Sharpe is going to be a perfect 3 option next to Damian Lillard and Deni Avdija next season. I think he's going to be one of those guys that can go off on any given night, but isn't going to be asked to perform like an all-star every single night. And I think that's just going to help Shaedon Sharpe a lot. And I think that's going to help guys like Deni Avdija and Damian Lillard have better games when every single matchup, the team has to also be making sure they aren't leaving Shaedon Sharpe open, because he has a really good mid-range shot. That's another thing he's developed this year. And he can pretty much get to the basket whenever he wants. And of course, his insane athleticism is something that teams are going to have to watch out for. And so keeping an eye on that, as well as Deni Avdija, as we just discussed, and Dame and his 3-point shooting next year is going to make for, I think, a pretty underrated big 3 on this Portland Trailblazers team. Now, another storyline this season, of course, is Young Hansen. Young Hansen is someone that at the time, I myself was pretty disappointed with that draft pick. I thought it was a bad move to pass on a guy like Cedric Coward, and that's not just in hindsight. In the moment, he was probably the guy I wanted most on this team. Carter Bryant, I think, was my number 1 choice. And then Cedric Coward and Derek Queen were right there with him. Young Hansen, I wasn't even thinking about him as a draft pick for the Blazers, especially considering the Blazers had just drafted Donovan Clingan, which, side note, Clingan has also looked great this year. But the Blazers draft Young Hansen, and after watching some highlights of him from the CDL and making a couple videos on him and just watching some of his highlights, I was kind of convinced, along with I know many other fans, that he was baby Jokic and he had what it took to grow into a really good player one day. And honestly, I'm not super surprised, but so far he just looks so far away from being far away from an NBA player. And that's not to say that Young Hansen is horrible. There's obviously the language barrier and just the huge change of pace from coming over from the CDL to playing in the NBA, and the speed of the game and so many other factors. I don't blame him at all. And in the last week or so, he has looked a little bit more playable, if you could say that. But considering the other players that were on the board and the position needs of this Blazers team, it just seemed a little silly, even in retrospect, to take him as opposed to someone like Cedric Coward or Derek Queen, who are playing like rookies of the year right now. But again, him playing slow to start the season isn't unheard of. I'm not super worried for him, and as long as he stays in that 3rd string center role for a couple years and you see steady progression, that's really all I'm going to be looking for. But slow starts to the season, again, it's not unheard of. Many great players have had slow starts to their careers, whether you want to talk about guys like Giannis or Steve Nash. Jimmy Butler had a slow start to his season, Drew Holiday even. So there's lots of players that start off slow And not saying that young Hansen's going to be the next Steve Nash or Giannis, but you have seen some flashes from young Hansen, and I do believe that he could still become at least a serviceable backup center one day for the Blazers, which also kind of works out because Klingen's looking really good, and that makes, you know, that whole decision easier when you don't have to worry about who you're gonna start and who's gonna be your franchise center. So if young Hansen can figure it out and become just a solid backup center, then I think that'd be great. As of the time of this recording, the Portland Trailblazers are currently 19-21. They had a 5-game win streak that unfortunately was snapped 2 nights ago. I believe I said last night earlier in the video, but 2 nights ago, to the New York Knicks in a pretty close game until the end of the game. The Blazers just let go of the rope and the Knicks were able to run away with the win. So they're currently 19-21, which if you told me at this point in the season, 40 games into the season, that they would be nearly at a 500 record considering the injuries that the Blazers have had, I'd be pretty happy with that. And you know, you can't blame everything on the injuries, right? Other teams are also injured, but the Blazers, I feel like, have had quite a bit more injuries than the average team, and they've had one of the hardest schedules. And you know, you can't go back and change anything. You can make excuses all day, but if Deni Avdija isn't super hurt from his back injury the other night, and you get guys like Scoot Henderson back soon, along with Jeremy Grant, who may play tonight actually against the Warriors, then I think that would be really huge. And I could definitely see the Blazers making a play-in push and potentially making the playoffs. We'll see. I think that would be awesome. Comment below, would you rather the Blazers fight for an 8th seed playoff spot, or would you rather see the Blazers just pull the parachute and try to get one more draft pick before going really all in next season? Something else that has been a storyline this season is Thiago Splitter. Of course, after the first game of the season, you guys know what happened with Chauncey Billups and the whole gambling scandal. I don't want to go too much into that, but Thiago Splitter, as the broadcast would say, has been the acting head coach for the Blazers. You know, they have to be careful with their language there, but over the season, Thiago has definitely improved quite a bit. At the start of the season, I was pretty down on him and thought, you know, he was fine, but I really wasn't a big fan of the way he coached, and I'm still not sold on him. I still don't think he's the guy to coach this team the next couple years when they're really trying to compete. His rotations have been pretty questionable, and especially the ability to draw up an inbound play the last month or so, I guess. Thiago and his rotations and just the way he plays guys certain minutes and his lineup choices are pretty rough. If you guys watch Locked On Blazers, shout out Mike Richmond. He mentions a lot, you know, coaches in the game, really their big thing is, aside from calling the challenge plays, is deciding who plays and when. And I think Thiago's pretty bad at that, to be honest. He could be worse, right? But I just don't think he's the guy. Personally, I think the Blazers would be best to bring in a guy like Mike Malone or someone who has a history of coaching winning basketball teams and you can plug him in. He can coach the team well, and that's the kind of guy that you want for this Blazers team, especially when they're competing over the next few seasons. You want an experienced coach, not some new guy who's still figuring it out, because at this stage, that could be the difference between making the playoffs versus missing the playoffs. So I don't want to take that gamble. Thiago Splitter could be a great assistant coach, but personally, I'm not sold on him for the long-term head coaching role. But for this season, you know, I think it's all right. Now the Blazers ceiling. This season, I think they realistically could pass the Warriors, right? They already have the tiebreaker. And, you know, tonight's game, I could be wrong. I don't believe that would change anything. So if the Blazers lose to the Warriors tonight and they end up tying them at the end of the season with their record, then the Blazers would still get the nod and would have the tiebreaker ahead of them. And depending on how the Phoenix Suns look, I could see the Blazers passing them up as well, especially when the Blazers get guys like Jeremy Grant and Scoot Henderson back and the team's fully healthy. And so at the end of the season, I'm kind of expecting the Blazers to land somewhere between that 7th and 9th seed. If you want to just say the play-in, then I think that's fair. Ideally, they make it to the 8th or 7th seed, so then they only have to win one of 2 games in the play-in in order to make the playoffs. If I had to put money on it, I would probably guess that the Blazers end up finishing 9th in the Western Conference, just with all the injuries, and seems like Scoot might not come back for a while. But I'm guessing the Blazers end up finishing 9th. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they end the season in 8th or 7th place and just have a lot better odds at making the playoffs, but we'll see. I think the Blazers, though, are in a good spot to definitely make the play-in, and should hopefully have a pretty good chance of making the playoffs as a whole. Again, comment below, where do you see the Blazers ending up this season? Do you think they make the play-in? Do you think they make the playoffs pretty easy? Could they fight for that 7th or even 6th seed position? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. So now the story to kind of follow the rest of the season is really injuries. Having Drew Holiday back has been great, and I think that's going to be really helpful. Getting Scoot back and having a true 1-2 point guard rotation who can help facilitate and take some of those point guard duties off of guys like Deni Avdija are going to be huge. And then, of course, if the Blazers are able to get guys like Matisse Thybulle and Blake Wesley back, who I don't think Blake Wesley or Matisse Thybulle are the reason for a handful of losses, but both those guys play great defense and just overall are better rotation players that you can play minutes each night instead of guys like Chris Murray or Ryan Rupert. So being able to take some of that weight off of Deni Avdija's shoulders and just let him do what he does best, which is getting downhill and scoring and playing a bit of defense, which, you know, his defense is something we didn't talk about, but it's definitely taken a bit of a back seat given everything else that he's been asked to do this season, which makes complete sense. But I think when the Blazers have some of their guys back, it's going to make a world of a difference for this team. And it'll just be interesting to see how the end of the season goes for the Blazers. A lot of this is also dependent on what trades the Blazers make. It looks like Robert Williams, Jeremy Grant, and Matisse Thybulle, if I had to guess, would kind of be the 3 guys that we could expect to be traded if they are going to make trades. It wouldn't shock me if this is a trade deadline where Joe Cronin and the team like where the Blazers are at, and they just think that they want to give these guys, you know, the rest of the season to play and just see how they do. But Robert Williams is on an expiring contract, and chances are he would go somewhere else in free agency this summer. So if they're going to get any value for him, now's kind of your last opportunity to do so. But comment below your trade targets for the Blazers. I really liked Corey Kispert up until that Trae Young trade. Obviously now Corey can't come to the Blazers. I really liked Corey Kispert or a guy like Buddy Hield. I've seen a lot of people mock and try and trade Jeremy Grant to the Warriors. And honestly, if the Blazers were able to make a trade happen where Buddy Hield and Jonathan Kuminga come back to the Blazers in some move for Jeremy Grant, I would like that. The money's hard to make work in that trade, but getting a bit of shooting and getting a young guy with a high ceiling like Kuminga would be huge. But comment your thoughts. Who do you want the Blazers to trade for? And maybe later this week or next week, I will make a full video dedicated to the Portland Trailblazers and what trades I think they should make this year. And so all in all, there's been many stories to follow for the Blazers this season, but don't sleep on them. They are a lot better than you think, and they've really held their own and have been a sneaky good team this year, even with all the injuries they've had. And so just imagine the potential of this team when they have a full and healthy roster. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I appreciate you guys being here. In the coming weeks, I want to try making at least 1 to 2, maybe 3 videos a week, just depending on schedule. And so make sure to comment your ideas, comment videos you'd like to see from me, or topics or players or anything you'd want to see me talk about. And the road to 3K subscribers is officially back on. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss any of the videos. They're only going to get better going forward. And again, thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and go Blazers. Peace out.